I was sitting at my desk when the notification popped up, a video message from my uncle. Confused, I clicked on it. The screen lit up with the familiar sight of my parents' living room. My heart warmed for a brief second, thinking they had sent me a message. Then I heard it. "She's a worthless burden," my mother's voice rang out, sharp as glass. I froze. "She acts like she's successful, but without us, she'd be nothing," my father added, his tone laced with irritation. I clenched my fists, my breath shallow. "You know she can't even afford her own place? She's been crashing at that tiny apartment for years," my brother sneered. Lies. I had been paying their mortgage for 3 years. Every month, I sent money home, sacrificing my own comfort to ensure they never struggled. And yet this was how they spoke of me? Rage coursed through my veins. I had dedicated my life to them. And this was my reward? I watched the video again, disbelief and fury battling in my chest.
How could they? How dare they?
I had given up so much, late nights, personal sacrifices, endless hours at work, all to make sure they never had to worry about bills. And they thought I was a burden? My stomach churned. I had always thought that family was supposed to stand by each other, to support and uplift one another. But here they were, tearing me down behind my back. The video ended with my mother laughing. Laughing. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to cry. No, not this time. I was done. I stared at my phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my banking app. The mortgage payments?
Gone.
I canceled the auto-pay and shut my laptop. For years, I had carried them on my back. I had fought to give them a better life while they mocked me in the home I kept afloat. Let's see how they survive without me. It didn't take long. 3 weeks later, my mother called, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Honey, we just got a notice from the bank," she said, her voice laced with fake concern. "There's been some mistake. The mortgage hasn't been paid." I let the silence stretch between us. A mistake? I finally asked, my tone calm.
Yes.
"You were paying it, weren't you?" A slow smile spread across my face. "Why would I?" I said, my voice sickly sweet. "After all, I'm just a worthless burden, right?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "I saw the video, Mom," I said coldly. "The one where you, Dad, and my brother called me a worthless burden. The one where you all laughed about how I couldn't afford my own place while I was the one keeping your roof over your heads." Dead silence. Honey, that wasn't." "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done." I hung up. My phone blew up with calls and texts. "Mom, it was a joke, sweetie. You know we love you." "Dad, we were just venting. Don't be dramatic." "Brother, stop acting like a victim. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. They had no idea what was coming. My parents prided themselves on appearances. They threw lavish dinners, boasted about their successful children, and pretended they were financially stable. But without my money, their facade crumbled. The foreclosure notices came quickly. They tried everything, begging, guilt-tripping, even threats. But I stood firm. No more. A month later, my mother showed up at my apartment. Tears streamed down her face. "Please, sweetheart. We'll lose everything." I looked her in the eyes, my voice devoid of emotion. "You already lost me." And I shut the door. I shut the door in her face, my heart pounding. For a moment, a twisted part of me thought I'd feel guilt. But as soon as I turned around, the memory of that video burned in my mind. She's a worthless burden. I owed them nothing. A week passed, then another. I heard through the grapevine, relatives, old neighbors, that my parents were spiraling. The bank had already seized their savings accounts due to missed mortgage payments. Eviction notices were piling up. But the best part? Their precious reputation, the one they had spent years crafting, was crumbling just as fast as their finances. My mother had always loved pretending to be the perfect suburban wife. She threw extravagant dinner parties, making sure the neighborhood saw her as high-class and generous. Now, the neighbors whispered behind her back, Their house was in default and people noticed. I smirked when I got a message from an old classmate. Hey, did you hear? Your parents might be losing the house. Crazy, right? They always acted like they were rich. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a satisfaction I never thought I'd experience. But I wasn't done yet. First, it was my father. Listen, he grumbled over the phone, trying to sound authoritative as if he still had control over me. I know you're mad, but don't let emotions cloud your judgment. This is family, and family helps each other. I almost laughed. Family? I repeated, my voice dripping with amusement. You mean the same family that called me a worthless burden? That laughed behind my back while I kept a roof over your heads. He stammered. Listen, things were said in frustration. You know we didn't mean it. I let out a slow breath. You're right, I said calmly. You didn't mean it. You meant worse. But don't worry, Dad. Now you don't have to pretend anymore. I hung up. The next call? My brother. Unlike my father, my brother didn't even try to be subtle. Stop being a petty brat, he snapped. Do you know how bad things are for Mom and Dad? They're about to lose the house. I let out a bitter chuckle. And, he exploded. Are you serious right now? You're going to let your own parents go homeless just because of some stupid joke. My fingers tightened around my phone. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice even. When you called me worthless, that was a joke. But when I stopped paying for your comfortable life, suddenly I'm cruel? You're being vindictive, he shot back. I smirked. Call it whatever you want. I call it justice. And just like that, I blocked his number. I got the call from an old neighbor. Your parents are moving out tomorrow. I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I wasn't heartless. I knew this was going to destroy them. But after years of their lies, their mockery, their ungratefulness, this felt right. The next morning, I drove by their house just to watch. There they were, standing on the front lawn, surrounded by suitcases and garbage bags filled with whatever they could salvage. I rolled down my window. Need help? I called out. They turned, their faces a mix of anger and humiliation. My mother took a step forward, her lips trembling. Please, we have nowhere to go. I tilted my head. Sounds rough. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Hope you figure it out, I said and drove off. Without the burden of their mortgage, my life changed instantly. I moved to a better apartment. Started traveling. Actually enjoyed the money I worked hard for. And the best part? I didn't have to pretend I owed them anything anymore. But I wasn't done. They needed to learn that actions have consequences. For the first time in years, my phone was silent. No guilt-tripping messages. No fake apologies. No desperate attempts to manipulate me. My family had vanished. At first, I thought they had finally given up. That maybe they had accepted the consequences of their actions. But deep down, I knew better. People like them? They don't learn. They plot. And when they finally came back, they came back swinging. A few weeks later, I started getting strange messages from mutual acquaintances. Hey, I heard you cut off your parents. What happened? Your mom told me you refused to help them when they got sick. Is that true? I heard they lost the house because you stole their money. I almost laughed. This was their move. Painting themselves as victims? Oh, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I made one phone call. To my uncle. The same one who had sent me the video. He picked up almost instantly. Knew you'd call, he muttered. You heard? I asked. He let out a dry chuckle. Your mother's been running her mouth, yeah? Telling everyone you abandoned them. I gritted my teeth. And you? You think I believe that crap? He scoffed. I saw the video. I know the truth. But most people? They don't. I took a deep breath. Then it's time they do. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story and turn me into the villain. So I did what they feared the most. I posted the video.
Publicly.
Along with proof of every bank transaction I had made paying their mortgage for 3 years. And a single caption. A worthless burden who paid for everything. But not anymore. Then I turned off my phone. And waited. It took less than an hour for everything to blow up. My mother called me 26 times.
Blocked.
My brother? He went ballistic in the comments, trying to twist the story. But people weren't stupid. They saw the receipts. And when my uncle chimed in, confirming everything, it was game over. The fallout was delicious. Friends they had once bragged to?
Gone.
Neighbors who had admired them?
Disgusted.
Their social circle collapsed overnight. They weren't the tragic victims they tried to play. They were parasites.
And now?
Everyone knew it. They were broke. Homeless. No one wanted to help them. Not after seeing the truth. I heard through my uncle that they were living in a dingy motel. My mother, who once prided herself on luxury, was begging people for money. And my brother?
Jobless.
Turns out, when your only skill is living off others, survival gets hard. One night, there was a knock on my door. I checked the peephole. My father. For a second, old instincts kicked in. I almost opened it. Almost let them back in. Then I remembered that video. And I walked away. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside, a letter from my mother. "We're sorry." I almost laughed. Not a single apology when they had a house, a good life, comfort. But now that they were at rock bottom, now they were sorry, I tore the letter in half. Cutting them off didn't just change my bank account. It changed me. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I wasn't living for them anymore. I was living for myself. A few weeks later, something insane happened. The video? It went viral. People related to it. They saw their own families in mine. And soon, I wasn't just sharing my story. I was helping others escape toxic families, too. And as my story grew,
so did I.
I got a new job, a better apartment, started traveling. For the first time ever, I was happy. And my family? They had to watch from the sidelines as the worthless burden they had mocked became more successful than they ever were. My uncle told me that my parents were evicted from the motel. They had nothing left. They tried to crawl back to relatives. No one took them in. They had burned every bridge. And me? I didn't feel bad.
Because they had done it to themselves.
One night, I got an email from my brother. "You won. Hope you're happy." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, I deleted it. I wasn't interested in winning. I was interested in peace. And I finally had it. The biggest irony? They thought I was weak. A burden. Yet in the end, I was the only one who had built anything real. I survived without them. They couldn't survive without me. If they ever read this, I hope they finally understand something. I wasn't their burden. They were mine. And I finally let them go. For good.